What we learnt in the last class? Can you recollect all the concepts we have learnt in the last class? We went through DML commands, I guess, update, delete, and null and is not null operator. So today we'll look at integrity constraints. Even before looking into this definition, we'll take a very simple problem. Create a table student and store the following details of students in my table. What are the details? Student name, marks, phone number. So what we have to do is we have to create this table. Can we go ahead and create this table? So we'll take up this problem. Create a student table with these three simple attributes: student name, marks, and phone number. How will you create a table? Create table student, and then you have name. We'll have that to be varchar 2 of 10, and then comma, marks to be of type number, and then we'll have phone number column to be of type number. We created the table. Now what else we have? After creating the table, we can insert one particular record into this table. How you insert a record into a table? We know this insert query, right? Insert into student, and then values is the keyword. I will insert some record here. Say I will insert record of Satish here. Say he scored 34 marks, and phone number will have some number here. So we have inserted a record in our student table. Very simple. We have already seen this many times. Now the thing is, I want to insert all this data into my table. The very first record, I'm going to insert only marks and phone number. The second record, I'm going to have Sam 341111. And the final record, I'm going to have Ram, and marks is going to be minus 55 and 67888. So I'm going to insert all these values. So I'm going to execute a set of insert queries, insert into student values. So first record, we are going to have only two values. What are that? Marks and phone number. So what values we'll have? We'll have 45 and we'll have this phone number. So again, I'm going to insert into student values. What values I'm going to insert? Sam 34 and 1111. So we'll have Sam and then 34, and then phone number is all ones. Okay. Third record is Ram. So we'll insert some value for Ram, insert into student values. So we'll have Ram here coming up, and his mark is going to be minus 55, and he is having some phone number. So we'll have that. So we have done all these things. Let's go and clear our screen. Let's go and select all the data from a table. Yeah. So we have our data inside our tables. Now, the next question that comes to our mind is, what are the issues in the data that we have entered? So, what are the issues you can spot here? There is one particular student without a name inside our database. And there are two students with the same phone number in our database. And there is one student who scored minus 55 marks. I don't know, even though students write bad answers, I don't think minus 55 will be the right mark to give to a student, right? We assume that marks should be between 0 and 100 in the examinations. So we have some bad data sitting inside our table. So this is not good. This is not a good example of a database. So we were able to spot the issues, and what is our challenge now? The challenge is to ensure that our table only holds student names that are not null. We are going to enforce rules on the data. We are going to enforce that marks entered should be only between 0 and 100. Phone number should be unique. So once when a student says this is my phone number, you can't have any other student having the same phone number. So how can you enforce all these rules on the data? So SQL provides us with the option of having constraints on the data. So you can say my table has all these constraints, so you can't have bad data entering into my table. So what are constraints? Constraints are nothing but rules for your database tables. Constraints are used to limit the type of data that can go into a table. Constraints are declared at the time of table creation using create table command, or can be applied to an existing table using alter table command. So when you talk about data, there are so many rules governing the data. A mobile phone number should not be less than 10 digits or greater than 10 digits. A registration number should be unique across the university, but it should not be null. Name should not be null. Marks cannot be negative or greater than 100 if the range of marks is between 0 and 100. So we have a lot of rules governing our data, and how can you enforce such kind of rules on the table? So we'll first look at the various constraints available in SQL. First constraint is not null. We can enforce a column to be not null. By that we mean the column cannot have anything that is null. Check constraint, you can specify a condition. Say mark should be only between 0 and 100. When you specify that condition using this constraint, you cannot enter anything other than that range in that column. Unique, this is like, phone number should be unique in the sense distinct. Each once when a phone number is entered, duplicate phone numbers are not allowed in that column. But the key thing with unique is you can have null values in your column. Either a student can have a phone number, or he can say he is not having a phone number, but he cannot enter a duplicate number in his column. Default constraint, it talks about say if I'm not going to enter anything, by default, what will be in that column? Say if I don't enter marks, by default, 0 should be entered in that particular column. So default, that is what default constraint is. Primary key and foreign key, we'll learn after learning all these constraints today. Okay. So how to apply all these constraints on the table? This is the definition for all the constraints we have seen just now. So we'll go with SQL Not Null Constraint first. What is the use of this constraint? The constraint ensures all rows in the table contain a definite value for the column. When I say name is not null, it is mandatory that all the rows for that column in the table should have some value. A space or a numeric 0 is not a null value. Please understand, if you give 0, it is not null. If you just mention space, it is not null. Space is a character. Null is the value being absent. So let us go and see how to enforce a not null constraint on the name column. So we'll go and enforce this directly. For that, I'm going to drop table student, because we are going to see how to enforce constraints while we are creating the table initially. Create table student, and then what we are going to have, name varchar to 10, and then we can enforce this constraint by just saying not space null. So you're not going to give a comma after varchar 2 of 10. You're just going to say not space null, comma. Marks can also be not null. We can also enforce that marks to be of type number, not space null. And phone can also be not null. Say we say every student should have a phone number. We can enforce this, right? Phone number and then not null. That's how we enforce a not null constraint for your table, and then the table is created. So what is the difference? Now if I try to insert only marks and phone number, leaving the name. So let me try to insert into student. So what I'm going to insert is, I'm going to insert only marks and phone number values. So I'm going to insert 54, and then some phone number I'm going to insert here. So I'm trying to enforce null on the name column. So when I perform that, I'll get an violation that this will not be allowed. You cannot insert such a bad data into our table, because you have enforced that rule that name should not be null in our table. Got it? So whenever you get this kind of a violation, cannot insert null into this particular table and column, it means that we have some rule on the data that should be entering this particular column. So likewise, you cannot enter null for marks or phone number. Can you try just inserting name and phone number? If I just try inserting name and phone number, I'm trying to skip marks. So you're going to have name and then phone number. Again, it will not allow you, because it says you cannot have marks to be null value. So that is how we enforce a not null constraint. Is this clear? So how many not null constraints we have on this table? 3 not null constraints. So there is one particular table defined in Oracle which holds the constraint definition for all your tables. So I have 3 constraints enforced on this particular table, and for each constraint system assigns a default name, and the data about all these constraints is stored in another table. The table is called user underscore constraints. This is a predefined table in Oracle. So you want to view what are the constraints established on a table, you have to go to this table to check that. So I'm going to write a query and tell you how to view all the constraints on the table student. So how can I view that? Select constraint underscore name from user underscore constraints, where table underscore name is equal to, I have to give the table name in capital letters, that is mandatory. So when I enter this, you see it tells me that there are 3 constraints on my table. All these 3 constraints are not null constraints. So Oracle by default assigns some constraint name to all the constraints I enforce. So what is this? Sys underscore C0024695 is one constraint name. Sys underscore C0024696 is another constraint name. So this constraint can be for your name not null, and this constraint can be for your marks not null, and this constraint can be for your phone number not null condition. So what is this constraint name? For every constraint we enforce in the table, system by default assigns the constraint name. So where is the data about all the constraints stored? It is stored in the table user constraints. So you can go and define what is this table user constraints. So you're going to see it's going to take the table name, what is the constraint name, what is the constraint type, everything will be stored in this particular system table in Oracle. So it's a predefined table in Oracle and I have not defined it. So it's going to hold all your constraint related information inside this table. If I want to know what constraint I have established on a particular table, I have to execute this query, select constraint underscore name from user constraints, where table underscore name is equal to student. The table name should be in capital letters. The next question that comes to our mind is, why should you have a constraint name? What is the use of a constraint name in a table? The very important use is I can go and disable a constraint. Initially, I said mark should be not null or phone number should be not null. Later on, I felt okay, we can't have this constraint. We'll just switch off that particular constraint. So I can go and disable a constraint by using the constraint name. I can enable a constraint by using the constraint name. I can even drop a constraint by using the constraint name. So how can you go and enable or disable a constraint? Say now if I try to insert some value here, insert into student, if I try inserting null values for marks and phone. So what I'm trying to do here is insert into student, only marks and phone I'm trying to insert. So if I try to insert something like this, 34 and 1111, what you're going to get here is a violation because name cannot be null. And suppose I want to switch off this particular rule, how will I do that is alter table command I'm going to use, alter table. Which table I'm going to alter? Student, modify is the keyword, constraint, constraint name, sys underscore C0024695. And then the keyword here is disable. So what I am saying, okay, go to this table and disable this constraint. What is that constraint? Name not null condition. So now if I go and execute this query, insert into student only marks and phone number, it will insert because I have just switched off that constraint. So let me go and delete all the records from student table. And then I can again enable that constraint. Later on I find name cannot be null. I want to again enable that constraint. How can I enable that? You can go with the alter table command. Alter table, table name, modify, constraint is the keyword, And then what is the constraint name here? Sys underscore C00244695. And then the keyword here is enable. So I'm just switching it on again. So enable in the sense it will enable that constraint. So from now on, your data cannot be null in the name column. So even before enabling this, I did one thing, delete the records from the student table, because earlier I had this name to be null for one of the records. When I'm switching it on, there will be a violation here because there is already a record with a null. You have to delete it first before enabling this constraint. You got it? So now if I go and try to insert a record with the name to be null, it will throw me a violation. What is the use of constraint names? You can go and enable, disable. You can also drop a constraint. I'm not happy with having phone to be not null. I can go and disable this constraint. I can totally drop the constraint. How can I drop? Alter table, student, drop is the keyword, constraint is the keyword. What is the constraint name? So that is the third constraint, right? When I talk about constraint name, C0024697. So you'll have sys underscore C0024697. So I'm going to drop this constraint. So you have dropped that constraint. So what is the constraint I have dropped? Phone numbers should not be null, right? I have dropped that rule. So now I can go and insert only name and marks in my table. So insert into student, only name and marks I want to insert, values. So name will be say sat and marks will be 34. So now we have dropped that constraint. See, you have to keep in mind when you enable or disable the constraint is still available for you. But when you drop the constraint, you have to again go and create it. Now I can't go and enable that constraint again because I have dropped it. Enable or disable will not work now. So what are the problems with default constraint names given by the system? It's very difficult to understand, right? Sys underscore C002467. What that constraint is. Sys underscore C002497. For which column? What constraint it is. So when you talk about the constraint names, say you have 10 tables in your database, all the constraint names will be stored in which table? User underscore constraints. So you have 10 different tables in your database, all the constraint names will go to this user underscore constraints. One of the key things you have to keep in mind is your constraint name should be unique across tables. For a student table, if I have constraint, one particular constraint name, I cannot have the same constraint name for an employee table. So constraint names are unique across the tables, and the system by default maintains that unique values, right? You see sys underscore C002467 is one constraint name. So the problem with this is it's very difficult to enable, disable by just using the default names because these names are very difficult to understand. Even the error messages are difficult to understand because of the default constraint names. So what is the solution for this is instead of going with the default constraint name, I can give my own constraint name. So it's easy for me to remember. So let us go and drop this table and see how can we give our own constraint names for all our constraints. So let us go and drop this table. So let me clear the screen. Drop table student. So we'll go and create this table again. Create table student and then name varchar 2 of 10. Now I'm going to give my own constraint name here. How can I give my own constraint name? I'll use this keyword constraint, that is the keyword, and then I'll specify the constraint name. The standard we use for giving constraint names are, first is the table name, student, underscore, which column I'm giving this constraint, name column. When it is a not null constraint, we'll say NN. So this is one commonly used standard to know on which table, which column, and what is the constraint. So constraint name space not null. So we are giving our own constraint names here instead of going with the system defined constraint names. For marks also, let's enforce this not null. So marks is of type number. Constraint. What constraint name I can give here? This is from the student table, marks column, and the constraint is not null and not space null. Likewise, for phone number also can we give this phone number. Constraint is the keyword. Constraint name is student table underscore column name is phone underscore nn not null. So now for these three constraints, I have given my own constraint names. Can I go and view the constraint names from user underscore constraints table? So we can go on to select constraint underscore name from user underscore constraints, where we will have table underscore name is equal to in capital letters student. So now what kind of constraints are there on my table? I can very well look at the constraint name and tell on the student table name column not null constraint, on the student table marks column not null constraint, on the student table phone column not null constraint. So our constraint name is self-explanatory here. So if I want to disable a particular constraint, say I want to disable this not null constraint on the phone column, I know what is the constraint name. Even without looking at the table, I can very well do that. I'll alter table student modify and constraint is the keyword. Constraint name is, say I know it's a student and then the phone number column, and then I know it's not null constraint and it's disabled. If you want to drop this constraint on the marks column in the student table, that not null constraint, how can I drop that? Alter table student drop constraint. What is the constraint name I have? Student table marks column not null. That is the constraint name. So how easy it is when you have the constraint name given. So you can very well work without all those system defined constraint names. Or else on a given table you will have 10 to 12 constraints, each one having its own set of big IDs, and we'll be asking you to drop or add constraints. That will be a big issue. So is this clear? Say if I try to insert null value in the name column, what will happen now? Insert into student. So I'm just trying to insert only marks and phone number values. So if I try to insert 34 and 11111, if I perform this, what will be the output? So it very well clearly tells you cannot insert null into. The user is Satish, the table is student, the column is name column. Another important key thing here is all the constraint names should be unique. One common mistake students make is, say for employee table also you'll have name field, for student table also you'll have name field. While you're enforcing the constraint, you will give name underscore NN for the student table, name underscore NN for the employee table. So you have two tables having the same constraint name. Then there will be a error. So that is why I have enforced this standard. What is the standard? You give the table name underscore column name. Because table name is unique in your database, definitely there will be no violation coming up. Got it? If you fail to follow that standard, what will happen is suddenly a violation will come up. You will not be able to enforce the constraint. Can I go to the next constraint, check constraint? So what do you mean by a check constraint? I can define a business rule on a column. For instance, take the marks column. I can say marks should be only between 0 and 100. If I enter -1, throw me a violation. If I enter 102, throw me an error. Not only marks, say I want the address column to have only address corresponding to Chennai or Vellore. If this guy enters Mumbai, throw a violation. You can enforce that rule. So check constraint will be used for such rules. We'll take up this example wherein marks should be between 0 and 100. We can't allow any other marks in the table. So the syntax for this is constraint name. Check is the keyword and then you specify the condition for that column. Okay. That's what we are going to establish now. Marks should be only between 0 and 100. So let us go and enforce this constraint on a table. So what I'm going to do is drop table student and then we'll clear screen. We'll create this table, create table student. It's name varchar 2. We'll only focus on the marks column now. Marks to be of number type, but then we are going to have a constraint definition here. So what that constraint definition is, constraint is the keyword, and then constraint name. How will you give the constraint name? Student is the table name, marks is the column name, underscore. For check constraint, I normally use CK, so it means check constraint on the table, and the keyword that comes next is check. After check, the syntax is you have to open parenthesis and then you have to establish the condition. What is the condition? Marks column should be greater than 0, greater than equal to 0, and marks should be less than equal to 100. Then you close the parenthesis and then you have to give a comma because the next data item is done. So we'll go to the last item, that is phone number. Phone to be of type number. That's it. So what we have done, marks, data type is number, constraint name we have given, check is the keyword, open parenthesis, mark should be greater than equal to 0 and mark should be less than equal to 100. So now we'll go and enforce this constraint. Can we go and see what constraint is there on this particular table? How will you see that? Select constraint underscore name. There is one more column in the user underscore constraints table, that is constraint underscore type. From which table? User underscore constraints, where table name is equal to in caps student. So you're seeing two things from the user underscore constraints table. One is I have a check constraint on the marks column in the student table, and constraint type is C. C here denotes it's a check constraint. So now let us go and test whether our constraint works fine. How will you test this? Let me insert some marks which is less than 0 or greater than 100. So insert into student values. Then let me insert marks for Satish with -2 and some phone number. So definitely I am violating the rule I have on the table. So it very well says check constraint on this particular column. See, it also gives the constraint name here, student marks underscore CK violated. So it says I'm not entering this data because you have violated the rule on this particular table. So if I try to enter 102 marks, if I try and enter 101, again it says violation because 101 is not a valid mark. If I try and enter 100 marks, the boundary marks, will it allow? Yes, Satish scored 100 marks. Yes. If the student gets 0, will it allow? Yes. But anything other than 0 or between 0 and 100 will not be allowed. So what we achieve by all these constraints? We are preventing bad data from getting inside a table. Can we go and look at some more exercises? Create a table with the following fields: name and location. You can call the table to be a test table, and you define a check constraint such that location should hold only Vellore or Chennai. Other locations are not allowed. How can you perform that? So let me go and clear screen, create table test, and then we are going to have name varchar 2, and then we'll have location. Location can also be varchar 2 of 10. Okay, now we have to enforce this check constraint. How can you enforce that? So we'll give constraint the keyword. Constraint name is table name underscore column name. Column name is location underscore CK for check constraint. Then keyword is check. Open parenthesis. What is that we are going to check? Location is equal to Vellore, or location is equal to Chennai. So insert into test values. So two things I'm going to insert. One is name sat Another thing is I'm going to insert a valid location, Vellore. It's inserting. Whereas when I say it's Mumbai, will it allow this particular location Mumbai? Check constraint violated. If I try inserting Chennai, will it allow it? So it's allowing it. So other than Vellore and Chennai, in that particular column, no other data will be allowed. So is this clear?